Mikro? Eins. One. Yeah.
This is hot mic, yeah? This is a hot mic.
Is it live? Is it on? I haven't said anything bad though.
Just go around.
So I think if everybody's seated there are also balcony seats upstairs if you want to use them. But I guess it's fine for now. But if you look up there are some, also for later maybe if more people come in, there are these little balconies. You can go and sit up there, a couple of people I guess. Just so you know, you can enter them through the left side, upstairs somehow. Wollen wir anfangen? Ja. Wait, we need... No, it's fine. Wollen wir damit anfangen oder nochmal das andere? Reicht so, ja, okay. Christoph, wollen wir anfangen? Sagst du Bescheid? Oh, we're live. Ach so. And we are live. Welcome to the Lightning Hackday, the first one forever it feels. It's been that long. And I don't want to say too much, just I'm really happy to be here in Istanbul. Thank you so much for everybody, thank you so much everybody for coming and participating again. Today we're gonna hear 3 sort of keynotes to get you a bit focused, to get you a bit on topic, to get sort of the creative juices flowing, if you will. Before we just start and hop right into our first speaker, which is Carla from Lightning Labs. This Lightning Hackday wouldn't have been possible with a lot of people. All of you, of course, all of you in the first place, so thank you for coming. We have a bunch of volunteers and people that helped putting it together. Now, I'm afraid to name individuals because I might forget someone, so just know that if I'm looking at you, please feel mentioned. Thank you so much. And also we have a couple of sponsors. We're going to hear from one of them today and more later tomorrow as well. So let's give a quick round of applause to Pocket. Matt's gonna say a word or two, and then right afterward it's Carla. Enjoy the afternoon, and I'm really looking forward to the Lightning Hackday, which I guess is now officially open.
Thanks. All right, thanks very much, Jeff. Face, what? Here? Good, all right. Good, yes, I'm Matt from Pocket. Thanks very much, Jeff, for the opportunity to say a few words. Actually, yes, you've heard it, I'm from Pocket. I am Matt, one of the co-founders. David and Toby, they are around as well. I don't want to talk a lot about Pocket. Some of you might know our service already, DCA stacking platform. So I think I just use the opportunity to say thank you, because it is just great how a lot of you have bootstrapped, a lot of you have helped to get our service out there, recommended it to your friends. And that is in turn why we are able to also sponsor events like these, be part of the community, help and contribute in that way, sort of back to the community. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions, what Pocket is, what it does, just approach us. We are around all throughout the weekend these coming days, so feel free to talk to us. Thanks very much and have a great event.
Afternoon, everybody. It's been a long, long time since we were all able to get together as a community. I'm so grateful to be here. It's been 2.5 years for me since I've been in a room with this many Bitcoiners. So thank you to Fulmo, thank you to all the sponsors. I'm super grateful to be here, and it's really, really good to be back. It's been a long time, so today I'm going to catch you up on what's been going on in Lightning since we last met at the Lightning conference in Berlin. So it's all very good stories start. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. A group of brave rebels came together to restore freedom to the galaxy, bereft with financial exclusion and money printing. But an unseen evil arose, which kept the rebels apart for 2.5 years. But they did not despair. They kept hacking, using a revolutionary technology called the internet, which is widely believed to be a bubble by mainstream economists. They kept in communication for the long 2.5 years apart. And this is what they've been up to. First, they changed the world. Starting with an anonymous donation, the Bitcoin Beach project in El Salvador established a circular economy in the surf town of El Zonte. They took the majority unbanked town and brought them onto a Bitcoin community-based banking system. This project was a catalyst for the Bitcoin law, which saw Bitcoin being adopted as legal tender in El Salvador in June of last year. And what I find amazing about the Bitcoin Beach project is that it was a spark for something so much bigger than even the Bitcoin law in El Salvador. It once and for all put to bed the question of whether anyone will buy coffee with Bitcoin. And ushered in a new era where now we don't ask whether anyone will buy coffee with Bitcoin, but where will they buy it next? And this could be in Costa Rica, where the Bitcoin Jungle project is working with 5 towns to establish a circular economy. They've established a headquarters where they intend to run educational meetups and plan to introduce a Bitcoin ATM. They're also very focused on merchant onboarding, with their pilot project onboarding 60% of a local produce to Bitcoin. They also hope that Bitcoin tourism will bring economic opportunity to the area in which they're operating in. Or that coffee could be in Guatemala, where the Late Bitcoin project is working with local schools to educate kids about Bitcoin. They're busy raising funds to bootstrap a circular economy, and they're particularly focused on sustainability projects to provide opportunity in their area, like a lake cleanup project where they're paying kids in Bitcoin to clean up the environment around them. Or, very, very close to my heart, that coffee could be in Mossel Bay, South Africa, thanks to the work of Bitcoin Ikasi. They're working with the Surfer Kids NGO and paying their coaches in Bitcoin. They're also focused on grassroots onboarding in the informal economy and have already onboarded 3 township stores to Bitcoin. This project is also very educational and outreach focused because they're determined to provide utility for the individuals who they are serving. And there are many, many more projects looking at community banking on Bitcoin thanks to the Bitcoin Beach experiment. All of them built on Lightning. We wouldn't be talking about a Bitcoin law, we wouldn't be talking about community banking if it weren't for Lightning. If any of these projects were subject to the speed or expense of the base chain, they wouldn't exist. Lightning fixes this. On top of community banking, we've also seen the base case of fast and cheap payments on Lightning really take off in the last 2.5 years. The exchanges finally got on board and are starting to report some great success stories. OKCoin launched their Lightning integration in March of 2021, and by October they're reporting that their Lightning transactions per user had doubled to 8.6. They also reported a routing error failure decrease from 20% to 5%, and a mere 12 sat routing fee per payment. Bitfinex have a similar story. 34% of their Bitcoin transaction count is processed over Lightning. They also had a day where they received 11 Bitcoin of Lightning deposits in 24 hours, compared to just 1 Bitcoin on chain, although this is a bit of a volume outlier in their general numbers. They also routed a 0.9 BTC payment last year, which is indicative of the network's increasing ability to route large payments, although this problem is far from solved, as you'll hear later today. And exchanges are really just the tip of the iceberg. Card coins, who allow their users to privately buy Bitcoin using prepaid cards, have added Lightning. Bitnob in Nigeria have enabled micro-saving for their customers through Lightning. Paxful recently onboarded their 7 million peer-to-peer customers in the African continent to Lightning. Don't know if anyone heard, but Cash App brought 36 million people to the table. Bitcoin Suisse also has integrated Lightning. Bitcoin-only exchange of Financial have Lightning support across all of their platforms. And Landifa, a Namibian Bitcoin exchange, has reported that over 80% of their transactions are processed over Lightning. But we didn't stop there. While some snake oil salesmen in Denver are touting billion-dollar vaporware about Web3, the Lightning community has been building before they brag. Over the last few years, we've seen a few projects emerge which give us some idea of what a value-for-value, Lightning-powered internet could look like. Podcasting 2.0 has been a big one. Launched by the podfather Adam Curry and Dave Jones, it allows customers to stream sats to their favorite content creator while they listen. The pickup on this has been amazing. There's over 4,500 podcasts on the podcasting index after only 1 year. And companies like Sphinx have enhanced this protocol to add things like tribes, which provide consumers with exclusive access to the content creators that they want to support. And what's special about this is it's live and it's deployed today. It's working. It's not something we've just been talking about. It's been something that we've been doing. Tipping has also never been easier on Lightning. Lightning TipBot, which allows Telegram tips, has had up and to the right growth since they launched. BottlePay provide custodial tipping across social network platforms, have launched across the EU. Killer app for Lightning Poyo feed is back, I'm thrilled to say. And last year, Strike launched tipping on Twitter for iOS users receiving in regions where they're active. Pay to read has also had a few things pick up. Stacker News is a Reddit-like experience where you can pay to upvote and boost your favorite authors. Yours.org has a traditional pay to read article set up. Bitcoin rewards also have had a lot of traction with Lightning. So instead of stacking meow meow beans from whatever random credit card provider you can now stack sats while you swipe. Satsback.com allow you to withdraw over Lightning, and Folders also recently brought out a debit card which allows you to stack sats as you swipe. Bitcoin gaming has been huge. At Bitcoin Miami 2021, we saw the first in-person live esports competition where people competed with Zebedee's CSGO Bitcoin-infused game. Throughout the year last year, Mint Gox also ran a series of online competition, and they boasted some pretty impressive transaction volumes. In July 2021, they processed 28,000 transactions, had reported 75K of fees, and processed 40 million sats over 2 days of competition. There are also some awesome pay-to-play solutions coming out, particularly from Thunder Games, Bitcoin Beach, and Thunder Beach, and my favorite Bitcoin Bounce, where you can stack sats from the comfort of your own couch. Yeah, it's really worth your time, seriously. Don't watch TV anymore, just play Bitcoin Bounce, I promise. And all of these people building on Lightning now have so many more tools available to run their nodes and to help manage their liquidity. In the past, channel opening was largely achieved on the social layer. People would open channels with folks they know on Twitter, with their friends, and perhaps some of the biggest nodes in the network, which had a centralizing force. We still have that social layer, but it's being fleshed out with a proper market for liquidity, which allows the network to much more efficiently allocate capital to where it's needed. If you're in need of purchasing a channel from a large node, you can still do so using Allenbig or Bitrefill's Lightning Thor. Lightning Pool is a marketplace where buyers and sellers of liquidity can match and create channels. And Lisa's dual-funded and liquidity advertisements, which I'll talk about in detail later on, look to move that functionality to the protocol. Liquidity management has also never been easier. So once you've set up your node and got your channels, the ability to arrange your sats in that channel or your liquidity to meet your own send and receive needs or the flows of the network is quite important. Lightning Loop is a subatomic swap service, multi-hop, which I work on at Lightning Labs, which allows you to do that. Boltz HQ is another one coordinated by a central server, which provides swap services. Blockstream's upcoming peer swap is an interesting project which moves us to the peer-to-peer level, but only on a single hops basis. And there are some really cool tools coming out that help people manage their nodes better. C Lightning Boss is a plugin by Z-Man, which pretty much takes all of your liquidity management away from you. And Alan Z Manage, I think Tobias is here, is a great tool for giving you some insight into where you should be directing your sats. We've also seen very cool communities of node operators emerge in the last 2 years. When we can't get together in person, we just get together online anyway. And that social layer has, represented by communities like Plebnet and Amboss communities, has really improved the quality of the nodes on the network. They've been very education-driven, aiming to decrease the learning curve for new node operators and thus increase our network's ability to route payments because they're higher quality nodes on the network. And they've also seen really interesting collaborative liquidity projects such as the Ring of Fire emerge, where people open channels and rebalance collaboratively to better connect to the network and to manage their liquidity. For people who want fuss-free Lightning nodes, there's also node services available now. Things like Voltage and Blockstream's upcoming Greenlight will provision nodes in the cloud for you. These solutions are non-custodial because they allow the users to keep custody of their sensitive key material. And they manage day-to-day operations such as backup management so that the end user doesn't need to worry about them, and provide a simplified API so that it's easier to interact with your Lightning node. If you want dedicated devices, no word to the wise, if you're going to set up a Lightning node in your home, please have a conversation with your significant other about not unplugging your Lightning node when he wants to play PlayStation. Robert, I know you're watching. There's so many great dedicated device options out there. Our wonderful hosts Fulmo have the Raspberry Blitz open source node solution. Umbrel have got a really sleek interface and dedicated device. MyNode have a Bitcoin and Lightning offering packaged with wonderful applications like BTC Pay and many more. And in light of the news from El Salvador, Nodl have recently launched something called the Nodl Lite, which is focused on developing markets that have higher resource constraints compared to regular node solutions. While everyone has been building on Lightning, the Bolt specifications have also been improving. There's been a lot of work done in the last 2 years. One of the big changes is that we merged anchor outputs to the spec. This is a big security improvement for Lightning channels. Previously, nodes would have to pick their commitment fees up front, and then by the time they came to chain, that fee could be unsuitable. And this is a real big problem in Lightning, where sometimes you need to timelessly claim on chain. So what anchors have done have allowed you to bring your own fees and fee bump a forced closed channel transaction so that you no longer need to overset fees on your channel just in case something goes wrong. And now this is a good improvement, it's a big improvement, but it's not perfect. Any of the devs out here who've ever had to deal with a mempool know that it's a very tricky attack surface to deal with, but I can really stress that this has been a significant improvement to the security of the network. We're also really lucky that anchors are pretty widely deployed now, so they're supported in LND and in Eclair, and C Lightning are planning on launching them soon in the next release, and I believe Rust Lightning also have support. Now, anchors, I think, are an interesting example of the security and user experience trade-offs we face in Lightning. To be able to bring your own fees and bump a transaction when you're at risk of losing funds, you need to have a UTXO available. What we've done in LND is reserve a single UTXO so that you always have funds available to fee bump. But this is quite a hack for the user experience to explain to your end user why they can't use one of their UTXOs, similar to the issues that people have explaining channel reserves in Lightning. Another solution here is to not reserve that UTXO and then tell your user to bring that UTXO when it's needed, but that also isn't a great user experience, suddenly having to whip your cold card out and bump your Lightning channel when it's closing. We've also made a series of other improvements to the specification and surrounding work. So we introduced warning messages, which allow nodes to have a failure mode, which is a lot less catastrophic than a forced close. So it's a lot less expensive. You can just send an error and share information with your peer. We've also added channel type negotiation to the open and close dance, which prepares us for upgrades such as upgrading to Taproot. We've also added optional TLVs, which is type length value fields, to every message in the protocol, which has vastly improved the extensibility of the Lightning protocol. This has allowed us to do things like introduce payment secrets, which address probing privacy concerns for MPP payments. We've introduced payment amount enforcement on the payer side, so that zero amount invoices are again safe to use. And we've recently merged a change to the spec which allows payers to add payment metadata should they wish to their payment, which can really enhance the amount of applications and the things you can build on Lightning. We've also had a new routing algorithm proposal, which I know Rene is going to be speaking about later today, and is very exciting. We've also introduced the blips, which is the Bitcoin Lightning improvement proposals, not to be confused with the bips, like I just did there. And what these have done is create a space for the community to discuss features and information that isn't widely going to be deployed. So it's not a bolt, it's not something the whole network's going to do, but it is a feature that a lot of people are interested in. And what's great about this is that it allows us to establish standards for building on Lightning without adding review process to the spec, which is already under some burden. And our strength as a Lightning community comes from the fact that we have an open protocol. It comes from the fact that anyone can implement Lightning and be immediately interoperable with anyone else. And what these blips aim to do is provide a space for that standardization and provide innovation at the edges without losing any of that common collaboration. We've got some currently active blips already. Congrats to Val Wallace on being first. She wrote up the Keysend blip. And the Podcasting 2.0 community have also written up their protocol. Also seen some great innovation around LNURL in the last while. So LNURL pay gets us around the invoice retrieval problem, which can be a big problem in Lightning when your application needs to go fetch an invoice from another node. And this has been pretty widely deployed in wallets like BTC Pay and Phoenix. They've also introduced Lightning addresses, which provide people with a familiar format to receive rather than a scary QR code or a wall of terrifying text. And they've also worked on LNURL auth, which aims to do away with boring username and password logins and move to node-based login. We've also got a lot of work upcoming in the bolts. It's a pretty exciting time for the Lightning Network. First off, Taproot was activated. Don't know if anyone missed that. And that means that we can start upgrading the Lightning Network to Taproot. That unlocks a lot of great wins like PTLCs and on-chain privacy and the ability to move DLCs into Lightning. And in October of last year, the spec authors got together and started working on how we're going to chop these changes up. My laptop broke on Tuesday, so I was going to update the slide, but it's surprisingly difficult to update a slide on your phone. But this week, Rusty also put up a PR to the spec to start that move towards Taproot by updating the gossip messages we send. Lisa's also got a proposal out for dual funding. This is a change to the open channel flow in the protocol, which allows both parties to contribute UTXOs to the channel open. You can have much easier liquidity bootstrapping with this change because nodes start out on the network with inbound liquidity, new nodes, and they don't have to go out and source it elsewhere. It also helps more generally with liquidity management because you can have a more balanced set of channels from the get-go. Following on from dual funding, Lisa also has a liquidity advertisements PR out on the spec. This allows nodes to gossip their willingness to fund and the amount of money that they will need to contribute a UTXO to a channel open. These channels are locked in for a lease expiry because people will pay for these channels, similar to Lightning Pool. They don't want to just immediately be closed. And there's a working experimental support for this and for dual funding channels in C Lightning. Route blinding is a privacy proposal from Bastian over at Usenc. And it allows people receiving payments to provide senders with a route to their node. This is very similar to the hop hints that we currently have in Lightning invoices. But one of the differences is that it allows you to tweak node IDs so that the person paying you can't locate your node in the network because the node IDs are not found. Only the people routing that payment onwards will be able to untweak and send it on to its destination. Route blinding also may include dummy hops. So if there's 4 hops, you can go 1, 2, and then that's actually your node, and you make up fake hops afterwards, which further obfuscates the location of your node in the network. So this has got some great receiver-side privacy benefits. Right now, you have to disclose your pub key, which is not great, and identify your node when you receive. This will help fix that. Rusty also has a proposal out for onion messages, which will introduce peer-to-peer messaging to the spec. This works when by the receiver onion encrypting messages similar to the way that we encrypt payments on the network, and then using a blinded route to receive responses from the person they send this message to. One open discussion here is that these onion messages are free right now. They consume resources from the broader network without having to pay for them. Now, this is already possible right now. A lot of people send messages over Lightning. They just do so by attaching them to a failed payment and having the receiver extracted on the other end. But this is part of a larger discussion about how we want to deal with denial of service vectors in the protocol. Rusty also has a proposal open, Bolt 12 or offers. It depends on onion messaging to send messages to nodes to receive invoices and route blinding to send those invoices back. This proposal is looking at addressing the invoice retrieval issue in the same way that, which is also one of the problems that Allen URL aims to solve. And right now on a protocol level, it's just assumed that this will be done out of band. So you want to pay someone, you just show them an invoice, and this would actually move that into the spec. So there's a standard way for people to retrieve invoices. This also provides static invoices, which is a feature that a lot of people have noted is very important, and does so without compromising cryptographic proof of payment. You can still get a proof of payment for static invoices built on offers, unlike other static invoice solutions. It also includes additional features like recurring payments and the ability to denote invoices in FIAT. And this is also experimentally supported in C Lightning. So there's a lot been going on, but what does that look like by the numbers? There's been a 330% node count increase since we last met in Berlin, a 220% channel count increase, and a 327% capacity increase. And those are Ethereum numbers. I find it quite amazing to see that kind of numbers in a protocol that is actually building up value and not just marketing. There is so much going on. So much going on. I had to crop this into 2 slides, thanks to Arcane Research for the picture. We've achieved an unfathomable amount for 2.5 hard years when we couldn't get together and do things like this. And the projects and the conversations that we'll have this weekend are a big part of what we're going to achieve in the next 2.5 years. So whatever you do this weekend, be it catch up with old friends or hack on a project, do so with an open mind and a full heart, because we're here to restore freedom to the galaxy and have a few beers. Thank you very much. Great, thanks everyone.
Do you want to do questions, or should we just...
Yeah, we can do questions.
do you have a second mic for the audience? It's mic-ish, but yeah. Okay, just... if there are any questions, don't be shy. It's all good. Rutzol's come around and pick your audio up. You're not going to be visible. Okay. Well, thank you, Carla, for the great overview. If there are no questions for now, I think we can probably that's also cool. I mean, we have all weekend. And, we can probably jump into the next keynote. Just a quick reminder. I'm blanking right now. Are we having Rene first or Nicolas first? Nicolas is going first. Okay. And I would say thank you, Carla, for. So, oh, there you are. Nicolas already there. Yeah. So he'll be up in 1 second. I just wanted to say a word, because, you know, I got the big Nazar, you got the small Nazars. This is my time to shine. But I actually just want to know, in case you don't know what this is, it does have the Fulmo colors, and so it's perfectly on brand. But it's actually something to protect you against the evil eye, against the evil spirits, and will help you preserve your privacy and your anonymity, just like the Lightning Network does. And whether you're on MeetSpace or you tread online, so this is to protect you. And if you can't see it, this is for people in the live stream. That's why it's a big one too, to visualize it better. What's that? The immortal eye. Oh yeah. Oh, they're also in the back. Yeah. So we have a great designer. Everything you see. Oh no, no, it's turned off again. Was done by Luisa, who the graphic design and the corporate identity, which is pretty great. So I just want to use this occasion to give her a shout out, because this is the kind of thing that you always see, but you never really truly appreciate, because it kind of sometimes comes as, if it's good, it comes as natural, and you and some of you probably know what I'm talking about. So I just wanted to give her a special shout out on this occasion. And next one up is Nicolas from Galloy, which is also a sponsor, and Kemal from Galloy has been helping a lot to set this particular event up, the Lightning Hackday in Istanbul. So thank you for all of your support. But unrelated to this, not only because they're a sponsor, but because they're also doing great stuff, like Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Beach wallet is running on their infrastructure, basically, which has been enabling Alfonte in El Salvador to do all the crazy Lightning stuff they're doing, and basically being one stepping stone, one building block, not stepping stone, one building block to get Bitcoin into El Salvador. But I don't want to like to break take away your kind of your fame. You can get your fame yourself. So please give it up for Nicolas.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm glad to be here today. I missed the first hackathon 2.5 years ago. My daughter was like 2 weeks at the time, so too small, but now I can go. All right, so I will talk about US0 Lightning and share why this is important to think about this in the space, and it's really based on the experience of El Salvador. Yes.
I'm really sorry. We're having some technical troubles with the stream, and since we're good on time, I cannot. We maybe we can take.
Yeah, sure.
How much do you need? 5 minutes. Let's take a 5-minute break, because then we can make sure everything is properly.
But are you also going to London next week? Or?
I'm not.
Yeah, we'll be more of us will be there next week. So.
Okay. We have an offsite in Mexico, like in 3 weeks, and so I don't want to travel too much.
But you just flew in for this event now? Or?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But I'm living in Lisbon, so.
This is a hot mic. Audio test. Okay, everybody on the stream, so we'll continue in about 2 minutes. You say now is on the internet. Can you?
At the same issue, I think, in Hong Kong, where spillover coffee.
I've got someone actually bringing me one. I should find. I don't know who's
Just give me. All right, welcome back after this brief intermission, which will be completely cut out of the stream later. So you're the lucky ones to see how the work behind the scenes goes. And in a couple of days, you will not notice what just happened, which was that we got some coffee and had some little Turkish sweet snacks. And if you missed it, you can get them later. So I'm really happy to announce our next keynote speaker, Nicolas from Galoy. Galoy has been really helpful. Kemal and Galoy with sponsoring like manpower and some financial power as well. And the title of your talk is USD over Lightning. I called it "My Fiat is better than yours." So give it up for Nicolas. Thank you for being here.
Alright, my Fiat is better than yours. It's true, it's over Lightning, right? Alright, thanks everyone for being here, and Jeff for making this happening. Our agenda today go over 5 items, so just a quick introduction about who we are, Galoy, and Bitcoin Beach. You already have a short presentation in the with Carla. So next, why USD over Lightning even makes sense, right? If you're into Bitcoin, why do you want dollar? We'll make a small detour on stablecoins. Then we'll go over the different way to make a USD wallet with Lightning. And then hopefully, if the God is with us for internet, we should have a live demo. All right, introduction. So Galoy is a 2-year-old company. We are a free and open source Bitcoin company. We are distributed around the world with 17 people currently, and we are hiring. Our business model is banking as a service, so you can think of like MongoDB or like FIAT for Linux. We have the same business model in mind. We are mostly known for the Bitcoin Beach wallets that we have created about 2 years ago. So maybe before Bitcoin Beach, what is Bitcoin Beach wallet? What is Bitcoin Beach? So Bitcoin Beach is a social project that starts close to 13 years ago. And the idea is really that in Exante, in El Salvador, so this is this small village in El Salvador, there is not a lot of opportunity for the youth there. And the idea that Michael Peterson had and Jorge and a group of people there is to try to make sure youth have opportunities so that they don't fall in and so they really develop youth programs for a long time 2 years ago, they decided to make the program evolve and add Bitcoin as a way to educate people about finance and how Bitcoin is a great money that they could be using, and this is really how this whole story gets started. I heard about it on a podcast, like end of 2019, I believe, and I said, okay, that's a real, very interesting project. And at the time, it was just when I was starting Gallery, and I was thinking, okay, like I need to collaborate with a project to develop a proof of concept, and this struck to me as a perfect opportunity. And so I reached out to them, and we decided to make this wallet for them dedicated to the community. And as Carla said before, like it's inspired the government of El Salvador to jump on the Bitcoin standard. So what does the Bitcoin Beach wallet look like? So it's from a user perspective, it's a custodial wallet. You can send and receive Bitcoin, you can send it to a Lightning or over on-chain layer 1. You also have a notion of username. So because many people in the community use the wallet, if you know their username, you can just send money to them, like a PayPal experience, very straightforward. We also have quizzes. So we have a series of quiz here where if you answer the question, you get 1 sat or 5 sats, and it's really a way for people to get on board into this ecosystem. We also have a map, which is very helpful marketing-wise, this map here, because the goal of the project is so Bitcoin was donated to the community, but then they need to spend it somewhere. And so you have the chicken and egg problem where, like, if you have people with Bitcoin in their wallet, but there is no way to spend it, then what are you going to do? Like, it's not very useful. So you need to convince the merchant to accept Bitcoin. And the key way to get the merchant to accept Bitcoin is having a map. Once someone will say, hey, all your neighborhood accept Bitcoin, like you should also accept it. And it was very effective to get the merchant on board in Istanbul. The quick feature of the Bitcoin Beach wallet, so you can send to, on-chain, Bolt 11, LNURL. As I said before, you can send and receive on different protocol. We also settle into a ledger. So the idea is that if you have a Bitcoin Beach wallet, I have a Bitcoin Beach wallet, whether you show me an invoice or a Bitcoin address, right? The wallet will recognize that, hey, I don't need to go on chain, I don't need to go on Lightning. I can just settle the transaction in a database, right? I don't need to go on this payment system, and it removes any fees basically when you do that. On the backend, we run on Kubernetes. We have this double account ledger. So the idea is to make sure that every liability of a user have an asset corresponding in the Lightning wallet or the Bitcoin wallet. One relevant feature is that we have a shared custody model in the Bitcoin Beach instance. The idea is that, so there is the hot wallet, which is LND wallet, and there is also cold storage. The general idea is that we want to limit how much money is at risk in the hot wallet. And so most of the fund is in cold storage. And the people who have the key of the cold storage are people of the community. So the way it works, it's a multi-sig, so there is people in the community have a code card, and they can sign transaction when there is a need to balance from the cold storage to the hot wallet. If you think about it, it's very similar to an exchange. Like every exchange, they want to keep a very small amount of Bitcoin in their hot wallet because if there's a hack, there's money at risk, and keep the maximum amount of money in this very secure multi-sig cold storage, which is also what we are doing. So another relevant feature that I will talk about in this presentation is the synthetic USD here that we are going to introduce in the upcoming months. So the reason we say it's a community bank, it's really because the community have access to the money, right? It's their money with the multi-sig. All right. So now let's get over the meat of the topic. So USD over Lightning, what does it even mean? So the first iteration of the wallet, so we are back 2 years ago, maybe just to have a product quickly to get feedback on, there was only Bitcoin in the wallet, there was no notion of dollar at all. And basically the first feedback I received was that the wallet is not usable. People don't know how to use it in El Salvador. Like they don't know what sets here. So the first feedback was that, like, you know, when you pay for a coffee, you pay for a coffee for $5, right? And you don't know how many sats you need to send. You need the wallet to do the conversion, right? The general idea here is the learning. You know, the first learning that we got, you know, the very first learning is that people think in USD, which makes sense. It's USD is the money that is being used there, or, you know, the only money that was being used there at the time. And so people, you know, when you buy something, you buy it in USD. So the idea that, you know, it's not going to change and you need to have USD in the wallet, right? And if we think about the different properties of the money, we have a store value, medium of exchange, and unit of account. And the first thing that we have in mind is to really, with this experience, was really to move the unit of account from sats to dollar, right? So you keep your money in sats. When you transact, you use sats, but the unit of account, what you're paying, is denominated in dollar. So this really is this first mental model where, like, unit of account have to be dollar, basically. And so it's not too complex to add, so this is really the first feature that we have added at the beginning. I mentioned maybe an exception. I think Summary Wallet is you know, they add USD and they removed it because they really want to, like, be Bitcoin only, and, you know, no integration with anything that have to be with fiat. But I will argue that the people using the Summary Wallet and people using the Bitcoin wallet are different persona. All right. So if we go a little bit further, right, the unit of account is USD. Now let's talk about the volatility of Bitcoin and what impact it had for the people in El Salvador. So let's think about, like, Carla, and she onboarded last year to Bitcoin. She's, you know, it works, right? She can receive money, and she received $500 from a group of visiting Bitcoiners. She's happy. You know, next month the Bitcoin law was adopted, and then she wants to pay a vendor from the money she received. And she opened a wallet, and she had $500 a month ago. Now she has $300. And so, you know, the first reaction is Bitcoin is a scam. Like, I lose $200 in a month, and I cannot trust Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin is making me, lose money. Like, something is wrong with here. And, you know, the issue is the volatility of Bitcoin, right? You have to keep in mind that I didn't go too much into El Zonte, but El Zonte is a cash economy. So the only thing that people have there is cash. They don't have a bank account, and so they're, you know, the notion that, you know, money can change, like, in USD value is something that is very foreign to them. They have to learn to think about, like, what does it mean that you have Bitcoin and it's, you know, the value is dollar change every day or even every minute. And so the learning here is that if you have your X funds in one asset, like in dollar, you should keep your money in dollar, right? You don't want to, if you know next week you will have to have the next month in $500, if you are converting this to Bitcoin, the price drop, like, you cannot pay your bill, and that's not great, right? The people in El Salvador live paycheck to paycheck, right? They don't have extra income, they don't have typically wealth, like, they don't have a bank account, so they don't know how to save money. So you should really keep your money in dollar until you can afford to have extra money, extra income, extra wealth, basically. All right. So the way to think about it is to separate Bitcoin the network and Bitcoin the assets, right? So Bitcoin the assets is this pristine assets that is capped. You know, you have 21 million Bitcoin. It's the most scarce asset in the world. But we are in the monetization phase, right? Like, we're in the process of going, 13 years ago from zero to, like, the biggest assets in the world. And during this monetization phase, like, we want to embrace volatility, right? The fact that the price go up and down, like, it kind of makes sense. And we should embrace it. But you can invoice it only if you can afford to, not need this money in the short term, right? The insight here is not everyone can afford full exposure to Bitcoin asset. If you have extra income, if you have extra wealth, you can. But if you have obligation, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. So now let's talk about Bitcoin the network. So there is Bitcoin the asset on one hand, Bitcoin the network on the other side. And before Lightning, what do we have with on-chain layer? So we have a very, very secure protocol, right? This is great, but if you think about a payment protocol, okay, you have 10-minute confirmation time, or sometime 1 day, or sometime even longer. You have limited scalability. All right. You have limited scalability and high fees at time. Right now the fees are low, but you cannot pay a coffee if you have to pay $50 in $50 for your transaction. So after Lightning, you have, so the payment is secure, you have instant settlement, it's become extremely scalable, and you have low fees. So now you can think about using Bitcoin as a payment network, right? Something you could not really done for retail payment with on-chain. And the idea that everyone wants to benefit. The idea that everyone might want to benefit from the Lightning Network, even if you don't want to be subject to the volatility of Bitcoin. One of the key aspects here that I will come back to the presentation later is the instant settlement. So we really move to something that takes 10 minutes or more to settle to something that settles instantly, and this allows for dynamic hedging. This is a key part of why it's possible to bring USD to Bitcoin and Lightning. All right, so why do we want to start maybe by using Bitcoin the network instead of Bitcoin the asset? And keep in mind that I'm really thinking from the perspective of El Salvador, right, or any developing country. The idea is that there is a very, very high learning curve to understand Bitcoin the asset. Why is that? The reason is that to understand Bitcoin the asset, you need to understand money, right? You need to understand scarcity, you need to understand why this matters, and you need to understand how the fiat system works to really understand Bitcoin, right? And this is a very, very steep learning curve, especially for people that always use physical, cash all their life. Like from going to here to using Bitcoin is a small step, but from going to here to understanding the value proposition of Bitcoin is a very, very large learning curve. And also you might want to use just Bitcoin the network, not Bitcoin the assets, because you may not be able to afford the price volatility. And so the solution out of this is to make a fiat option available on top of Lightning. What does it bring us? What does it bring to us? So users know about USD, like they all their life they transact with dollar, at least in El Salvador. They can transition from Bitcoin the network to Bitcoin the asset whenever they're ready. They also could control, like, okay, you start by being 100% USD, and then you move slowly over time to Bitcoin the asset. And if we bring a lot of people to the Lightning Network, right, we can really kick this network effect of having many people around the world that suddenly are connected to this network, right? And the network is really as good as how many people there are on the network, right? But the idea here is really to move to, okay, we have a store value before we were in sats, and so now the store value is dollar. The medium of exchange doesn't change, so we're still using sats for the medium of exchange, and unit of account is dollar here. I hope everyone is following. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. But so the goal is to move a store value from Bitcoin to dollar. Right? A small detour on stablecoins. So why not use stablecoins? So the pros are people are familiar with dollar, it's digital, it's already very popular. And so basically, if we use stablecoin, what does it mean is that the medium of exchange is dollar, right? And all the then it might be easier, right? We use Bitcoin if like we want to have a store value in dollar and we want to have a unit of count in dollar. Why do we want to have the medium of exchange in sats? Like, I think it's a relevant question. The stablecoin market is very high. Like there is about $200 billion today in stablecoin. But here's the problem with stablecoin and why it's relevant to use Lightning. The first problem is the problem of interoperability. So let's say Alice wants to collect money, and so there is other people that want to send money to her, and maybe there is Bob, he said, okay, I will send you USDT over ETH, and maybe Carol will say, okay, I have USDC over Tron, and Alice say, oh, like I have a USDC over Solana, and like it doesn't work, right? Like, so there is this compatibility issue. Related to that, there is also a high fee to use stablecoin today. The idea is that if Alice wants to send money to Bob, Alice might say, hey, do you want to send me USDC? Bob will say, okay, now I have USDC over Ethereum. And I say, no, like, so it's too high fee, right? And so the high fee problem is very prominent with stablecoin. And the result of the high fees is also race to the bottom. If you think about USDT starts being on Omni, which is a layer on top of Bitcoin. But then in 2017, the fees of Omni was very high. And so you're like, okay, maybe it's time to move to Ethereum. And Ethereum was cheap at the time, but then the usage of Ethereum grew because there was a lot of usage for stablecoin. And so next, like, okay, maybe the fee, initially you said, okay, it's Bitcoin or Ethereum is the same, but this is too expensive, and then you move to Tron, right? And then you're like, okay, maybe the next step is to move to another protocol that is even less secure than Tron because it will be lower fee, right? And there is really, because of the fee, there is this race to the bottom that is moving to a protocol that is maybe more scalable but also less secure, so it's not great. So the reason to maybe not use stablecoin is that it's not always interoperable. So even if you have USDT, like there is USDT on Omni, there is USDT on Ethereum, there is USDT on Liquid, there is USDT on Tron, and I think there is like 8 or 9 protocols. And if you have, on top of that USDC and BUSD, and like you have like, it's like there is no sharing point, right, on which protocol to use. Another issue with stablecoin that is not here with Lightning is high fee. And also sometimes they are not instant. I mean, transaction might be faster if you use some of the faster protocol, but they're also typically lower, they have less security. All right, so let's talk about using Lightning and how it works. So, sorry, there was a question, but I could not hear it.
I said, how about stable coins on Lightning?
Was there?
I'm coming to it. But I know John is speaking, but I cannot see him.
He was up there.
Hi, John. All right, USD over Lightning. So, Alice wants to buy coffee from a merchant pub, right? So you have Alice, you have Bob, and so, okay, that will be $5. So Bob open his wallet and say, I want to have $5, and Bob type 5. So what the wallet of Bob is doing is converting $5 to sats, and then, okay, it's like, let's say the price is 40K, right? So $5 is 12,500 sats. So the wallet creates an invoice for this amount. And here we will on the first use case where store value is sats, medium of action is sats, unit of account is USD. So easy, right? But here you have price exposure. So both Alice and Bob, basically they are subject to the volatility of Bitcoin. So now let's think about USD over Lightning. So where the Bitcoin exposure is optional, right? So we're moving the store value from USD to sats. So how does it work? Basically, it's happened under the hood, right? So Alice show a $5 Alice hold $5 in her wallet, and Bob also typed $5. And when Alice sent the money to Bob, there is basically what's happening in the background is this dollar is being converted to Bitcoin, and this is what I will explain just after how this is working. But this is a basic idea of how you bring USD to your Lightning. You need a way to store USD somehow, right? And when you just initiate the transaction, this USD value is being converted to Bitcoin, and then the payment is done over Lightning. And if the recipient wants to have USD, then the recipient have to do the inverse operation. All right, so let's go into the different way to implement USD wallet. And here the key point is that because there is no sharing point on stablecoin, right, there is this different stablecoin option, there is this different protocol. Maybe the sharing point is Lightning, right? This is a way to transfer value from two different parties. And I will go over 4 different examples. So, and it's really a scale of trust, like from, I guess, trustful to trustless. So the first option is to have USD in a bank account, you know, to have a stablecoin option, to use derivative market, or to use DLC. A note for John, that I know is in the room somewhere upstairs. It's not a full comprehensive list, and there is a lot of nuance here. One thing that I'm not diving into is how Omnibolt is working, because I don't fully understand the protocol, but I'm sure John can explain this better to you. Alright, so how does USD in a bank account work? So the idea is that you need to have first a bank account, and you also need to have an account at the fiat spot exchanges with like a USD BTC pair. The pros are it's very safe way to your USD, right? You have USD in the bank account by definition. It's one of the safest way to store your dollar. And you have also connection with the traditional banking system, which is useful. But the cons, and this is probably the biggest cons, is that like for a startup, like if you want to make a wallet and offer USD to your users, you need an access to a bank account, which is typically called an omnibus account. And getting this account is very hard. The reason is that every bank around the world are regulated, and they have to have a licensing requirement. And to get a license, there is all a series of like hundreds of procedures they need to do to make sure they are compliant for their jurisdiction. And when a bank offers you an omnibus account, basically because an omnibus account is an account where you have, as a startup, you have all your users are using the same account and you manage the balance for them. The bank doesn't really see what's happening in this account. And so they trust you to all the procedures that they have to do for their own user. You have to pass those procedures to your own user. And basically you have to work very hard in terms of regulatory burden to get access to this omnibus account. And so it's a very, very, very high barrier to entry. So to get a charter, banks need to comply with many regulation procedures that are passed to you as if you want to have access to a banking system. You also have some downsides, so there is still some counterparty risk if you use this solution, because if the bank defaults, like if the bank, there is a bank run, in that case you might be out of your money, right? So the safest option would be to use treasuries. A last note is also if you use this option, you don't get yield typically, so like the bank will generate yield. So the USD that is on the bank account, the bank will give loan to other people and they will generate interest, but the bank keeps the interest for themselves. So the way the money flow is working here is that you have let's say $100 in the bank, you are transferring to a spot exchange, you're selling the dollar to buy Bitcoin, you're transferring to a Lightning wallet, and then you make a payment. This is really how, as far as I understand, Strike in the US or also Bottle K in the UK, like this is how they bring dollar or pound right to the wallet. This is their business model. And this is for sending money, so we read from dollar to Bitcoin. If you are a merchant, you will have the flow in reverse. So it's like here you will receive the sats from the Lightning wallet to the spot exchange, and you will buy dollar here and send it to a bank account. And this is really the, from my understanding also, the business model of like OpenNode or Alex Mercado. This is the typical payment flow that they have. All right, probably not much that you're discovering here if you know how this company are operating. The next step, maybe a bit more trustless, is the use of stablecoin. And here you need to have a crypto spot exchange. So you don't need an exchange that is USD to BTC, you need an exchange that can do USDC to BTC. But one of the pros here is that it is much easier to get a wallet for a stablecoin than to get access to a bank account. And I cannot stress how much easier it is, because you can just, throw a lot of dice and you get a random number and you have your wallet and you can receive a stablecoin. So it's really easy. But the cons that, okay, you have a third counterparty risk with a stablecoin issuer that is bigger with a bank. You can't transfer with a bank account after. You don't generate yield as well. So here the flow of money will be similar, but the difference is instead of having $100 in your bank account, it's in a crypto wallet. But the flow otherwise is very similar. And my understanding of this is how, for instance, Strike is doing, but they're doing it in Argentina. And so the way they do it in the US and in Argentina is different. In one case it's USD, in another case it's USDT. It is based on my understanding from discussion on Twitter. All right, maybe a usage that is a bit more innovative is to use derivatives. So the first is USD, the second is USDT, the third use case that we can go over here is derivatives. Here you need a derivative exchanges. So the benefits from using derivative is if you're aware with something called the cash and carry trade, you get yield on your USD deposit. And over the last year, you will have 6.5% annualized over, 6.5% annualized over the last 6 months, 18 for the last year. So it means you get 18% by just having USD in your bank account, right? By doing this trade. And one of the benefits here is that if you use derivative, you don't have USD anymore. What you're creating is a synthetic USD. And in that case, you don't need to rely on the banking system anymore at all. Like there is no more connection to the legacy system. On the USD case, I mean, it's obvious, like you have a bank account. On the second case, you don't have yourself a direct access to a bank account, but the issuer have, right? So there is still some trust here. If you use derivatives, there is no more legacy banking system. Some of the cons is that the yield that you get is variable, so you can get negative yield in a bear market. You have also an exchange risk. You have to have a position on an exchange at all times. So if the exchange gets hacked or the money gets seized, the funds are at risk. You have liquidity risk and liquidation risk. So you have to monitor your position very carefully, and it's more complex to implement. One downside is that you can't transfer to your bank account. So, you're outside the financial system at this point. So here is how it will work. The payment flow here is a bit more complex, but the Lightning wallet will send money to a derivative exchange. So let's say you have 200k sats you want to hedge, you want to keep a dollar position. So you send half of the money to the exchange. And the hedging here is really happening at the step 2, where you have this $100,000 sats on the derivative exchange, and you have a short position, maybe minus 2x on the exchange, right? So the general idea here is that you have Bitcoin on your Lightning wallet here, and this is a long position, right? So here, if the price go up, you earn more dollar. If the price goes down, you lose some dollar. Here, because you have a short position, you have the opposite effect. If the price goes down, you earn money. If the price goes up, you lose money. But basically, if you compensate, for every dollar that you earn here, you lose it here, and vice versa, you become completely immune to the volatility of Bitcoin price. And this is great because now you can create the synthetic dollar and you can create it outside of the financial system. When you're paying, so if you're paying an invoice, the operation that will happen is that, let's say I'm paying an invoice for 50k sets. So this money will be out of the Lightning wallet. And basically the position on the exchange will have to be adjusted at this time, in real time. Alright, the last option that I will go through is the use of DLC. So DLCFD, to be precise. So DLC is the idea of district lock contract. So the very high level about what the DLC is that it's similar to Lightning in the way that I need to find a counterparty and I enter a contract with it and we make a 2 out of 2 multisig. The DLCFD is a special type of DLC that we're basically simulating what we will have with a derivative exchange. And it's really a contract for difference. So the main difference with the use of a derivative exchange and DLC is that on the derivative exchange, you have to have an exchange somewhere, right? If you use DLC, then it's completely peer-to-peer. You interact a contract with someone that you find somewhere, but there is not this central exchange that every people go to. One of the requirements is also to have a trustworthy oracle that will give you the price of Bitcoin to dollar, which is you need to trust the oracle in this scenario. So the pros is that it's the most sovereign individual option. Like in that case, you can create a USD that is a synthetic USD position, and there is not even an exchange here, and you can have a USD balance, right? It's very powerful. How does the yield market, will evolve is a question mark. The cons is that there is oracle risk. There is also liquidation risk because you have to take the short position. And so if the price goes up quickly, you may get liquidated. The smart contracts are very complex for DLC. You need to over-collateralize for DLCFD. There is no full implementation yet. So this is more like something that may evolve in the future in the next couple of years. I think the stage of DLC today is more like where Lightning was maybe 3 years ago, so it's still a whitelist, and you probably don't want to deploy wallet today for like a lot of users. One last comment is that if you want to offer a Lightning wallet with a USD balance that anyone can pay for a coffee, you also need to operate in a very liquid market, meaning you want to, the short position you have, you want to make it evolve to always be hedging for every dollar that you have, and it might not be very easy to hedge very quickly on using DLC. The real question is that will there be a very liquid market for DLC in the future? It remains to be seen. So how the use of DLCFD will work for Lightning to create USD balance? So you will, as a Lightning operator, you will need to find a peer, and then you will enter in a contract. So it's very similar to the derivative exchange here, but instead of entering to a contract on a centralized exchange, if you use DLC, you will basically create a contract on-chain or on Lightning. And then when you pay, this is where you will move money out of your Lightning wallet, and you will need to update the contract, which is why you need liquidity for the market. So as a summary, I went over 4 different ways to create USD over Lightning. There is really a scale of trust here. So this is a more trusted, this is a less trusted, right? Or like, I call it regulatory dependency. So with a bank, if you have the option of a bank account, you need banking access. For that you need approval from the regulator, so it's very hard to get. You have the option to use something like a stablecoin, like USDT. Here it's easier because you can create a wallet over USDT. The access is much easier. There is less trust than with the dollar. You can use derivative, which you can do completely offshore, completely outside of the banking ecosystem. And you can use DLC, which then you only, basically it's very trustless, you just have to trust the oracle, right? So where the trust, in the first case you have to trust the bank. In the second case, you have to trust the issuer, but also the bank that the issuer dependent. So there is a chain of trust here. Here you just have to trust the exchanges if you use a derivative exchanges. Yeah, DLC you have to trust the oracle. So I said dollar, here high for the dollar. The reason is that all the regulatory burden that the bank have to apply to you, like it costs a lot of fees, and those fees you have to pass on somehow on the customer, right, or on the ecosystem somehow. And those fees, you typically have lower fee if you use stablecoin, or even lower fee if you use a derivative exchange. I talk about the yield. So the yield is really how much do revenue I get back from the dollar I have. Typically in a bank account today it's none. With USDT it's none. With a derivative it can be from 6 to 18%. It varies greatly depending on the funding market on derivative exchanges. What yield do you get on DLC is a question mark because it's not being deployed yet. Maybe one of the downside of going with a very trustless manner is that you only get fully banking integration if you get access to a USD account. The reason it matters is that, like in El Salvador, for instance, a lot of people want access to the banking system, and so not having access to banking system is a limitation, especially for like corporation, enterprise. They want this. All right, any questions so far before I do a quick demo? I don't know how much time I have left. How much?
Whatever you need.
Okay. Any question? Can I have some water? Can I have some water?
Yes.
So just one thing regarding DLC is that you mentioned that you need to trust the oracles, but you can have as many as you want, right? Depending on the implementation. So it's basically even less trustless than. So it's lower down on the scale.
Yeah. So the question is like for DLC, you can have multiple oracle, and so there is less stress. Yes, that's correct. You could have, let's say, 2 out of 3, right? So you have to trust 2 oracle out of 3, or like 3 out of 5, or you can set up the way you want. And in the case, to steal the money, the oracle will have to collude among themselves. But if, assuming the oracle are large exchanges, what are the odds that they collude to, make a contract that make an invalid contract is very hard to coordinate. It's very hard to coordinate, right? But yes, you can reduce the trust by having many oracles. Indeed. Any other question?
Yeah, I've got one. Hi. So for DLCFD, how do you get USD or any other fiat-based liquidity into the system? As I understand, it's a smart contract, but on the other end, you probably need to have some liquidity.
Yeah, so the question is, if you use DLCFD, how do you get dollar or USDT into the system? You don't need. So if you use either derivative, so if you use derivative or DLC, you are creating a synthetic USD. So there is no USD somewhere. You just, because you have a long position in Bitcoin, a short position either on the DLC or on the exchanges, you have a synthetic, meaning you have an equivalent position of USD, but there is no USD somewhere in the bank account. There is, it's really synthetic USD, right? So there is no USDT, there is no USDC, there is no USD, which is the magic of it. I forgot to mention the use of DLCFC also on Lightning is also called a stable channel. Any other question?
When you, I thought it was really interesting the way you're talking about basically creating long and short positions in order to sort of decrease the volatility of holding Bitcoin in your wallet. if I then want to send Bitcoin, if I want to send Bitcoin over the Lightning Network, whatever it is, do I then have to close those positions, and then does that incur a bunch more fees? Or how does that work? Or is it someone who's custodially holding those assets, who maybe closes smaller ones when they need to, or does it happen on an individual level?
So maybe one thing mentioning is that if you use the dollar or the USDT, so the dollar have to be custodial, USDT also mostly custodial. You can create derivative or DLCFC either in a custodial way or in a non-custodial way. The way we have implemented it is using derivative, and it's like there is one pool account, and so if you as an individual user want to send $5, but at the same time there is another user that want to receive $5, there is no need to re-hedge, because like the equivalent amount of USD need to be hedged is the same, right? But no, if you send $5 and there is like no one is sending the opposite flow at the same time, then you need to indeed adjust the position of the exchange. Maybe for $5, you know, most of the contracts on exchanges are like $100 or more, so like if there is only a $5 amount, you don't do anything, but as soon as you reach this threshold of like $100 or something you can define, then you adjust your position at this time. So let's take an example. You have a $1,000 hedge, and then you open your Lightning wallet and you want to pay an invoice for $100, right? If there is a $100 hedge, it means on the derivative exchange there is a short position worth $1,000. But now because there is $100 that are going out, there is only $900 that need to be hedged, right? So you need to readjust your position and buy back $100, so you go from -1,000 to -900 to keep your hedge properly.
And when you start to scale up these transactions to thousands or millions a day or whatever it is, when you have to adjust your position constantly, how does that work as a business model? Are you incurring a large amount of fees with the person who's actually holding those assets on your behalf, or how does that look from a business perspective?
Yeah, good question. So how does the fees is being passed to the user? So one interesting thing, you know, this is why the fee is high and here is lowest, is because first, when you trade on the derivative exchange, the fees are typically much, much lower than you would trade on the spot exchange, because typically the markets are much more liquid, and also there is a lot of exchanges that are offshore where there is less regulatory burden, and therefore they can bring down the cost to you. So, you know, typically you may use exchanges that have like 5-8 basis points, right, when you trade, and so you should typically be passing this cost to the user, right? So like instead of sending $100, maybe you will send instead of sending like $100, you will have to send 99.95 or 99.92, and maybe the spread can vary depending on the volatility of the market. But also, it really depends on what is your as a custodial wallet, what is your payment flow? All right, is this one better? So it will, if you have equal flow of sending and receiving, basically you can just match the, the trade, and you don't need to go to the exchange, right? Like if someone sends $100, someone receives $100, then you have no cost on your end, really, right? And so it's also really depend of how your user are behaving on the wallet, right? Any other question?
Can you please explain a bit more about Exchange and Oracle, and how can this, is it like more trustable, Oracle, than Exchange? About security.
Yeah, so what is the security trade-off between Exchange and Oracle? So there is less trust in Oracle. The main reason is when you use an exchange, you have to deposit the money on the exchange, and they take custody of your money. In this model, you can use leverage, so you can use 2x, 3x, 4x leverage. There is a trade-off between how much money you deposit on the exchange and like your risk of liquidation, so you have to think about that. But you are trusting them with some portion of the money. On the Oracle, you don't deposit the money to your exchange, you keep custody of the money, so there is less trust for the Oracle, right? You don't delegate the custody to someone else, you keep custody of your assets. The trust on the Oracle is to make sure that the Oracle doesn't lie. So at some point there is a settlement of the contract. The Oracle could collude to such that like your other party might get the money even if it's the price is not right. So there is trust on the Oracle, but it's much lower than the trust on the exchanges. And as it has been mentioned before, like you can also have a system. You can also have a system where you have several oracles. So the idea is that you could have different exchanges, and each exchanges will broadcast the price maybe every hour of their spot or derivative market, and it will be signed by the exchanges. And if you said, okay, it's 4 out of 5 oracle need to agree on that, then there will have to be 4 oracles that collude among themselves to change the outcome of the DLC, which is very hard to do. So with this option is the trust is very limited. Like it's very, your risk of getting out of your money is very low.
How will the price be like decided between the different among different oracles?
Do you want
among different oracles, how will price be decided? Or is it like just one oracle that is deciding the price?
So, 1, 2, yeah. So if you have several oracles, I guess it's an implementation detail, and I'm not sure how. Like, I don't think there is anything like this yet that has been implemented. But in theory, the idea that you have like maybe 5 oracles, you need to have 4 of them need to say something, and maybe you will take the median of the price, right? So. Like you take, let's say Bitcoin price is 40K, and so one would say maybe it's 40,005, one 40,002, one 40,000, maybe you take more the median than the average, but this is the idea that you will select the values that combine all the exchanges, so that if one exchange is lying, one oracle is lying, like it's okay, right? You need to have a majority of the oracle lying to get you out of your money. I'm also I'm not the most expert on this, like on DLC, so maybe I'm saying something not right, but that's possible. So hopefully I'm not saying too much, but yeah. All right. Any question? No more question. Alright, so I have a 5-minute demo here. The idea is to just show an insight of what we have prepared for the hack days. So the implementation that we have currently at Galway is that we're using a derivative market to create USD. And so it's a custodial wallet, it's an aggregate wallet. So for every people interesting tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, we can give you a DWT token with a wallet that is preloaded with $21 and 21,000 sats. So there is 2 wallets, there is a BTC wallet, there is a Satoshi wallet, and you can use it to send payment, receive payment, see how this works. The derivative that we have been using in the background for the demo is OKX. It will not be very complex. So we have if you go to our GitHub repository, we have a dealer repository where there is this implementation of the hedging that is done with OKX, but it will be pretty straightforward to use other exchanges, other derivative exchanges, or just use straight USD or USDT. So everything that we show here is open source. So if you want to have your own, create your own wallet that is USD compatible, you can just clone our repository and get started whenever you want. All right. All right. So we're using something called Graphql for the API. Here I have so we have a README that is, for the people that want to go to it tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. There is basically how to, get access to balance, or to receive a payment, or to send a payment. Right now we'll just use this query here, which gives me a list of my wallets, what is my balance, and what is my currency. So copy clipboard here. Alright, so I'm executing the query here. So this is my results. So I have wallets here. I have an array. I have two values. I have a first ID. This is a wallet ID. I have a wallet currency BTC, a balance. So here we have 21,000 sats on this wallet. And I have another wallet here with a wallet ID. The wallet currency here is USD. And here I have 2100. We use cents as a unit of account for the USD wallet. So it means we have $21 in this wallet. So I have preloaded the wallet here with a GWT, which is a way to authenticate to the wallet. So tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, we can give you a GWT so you can experiment with it directly. All right, so if I go over, let's say, sending USD over Lightning and paying no amount invoice using USD, so I have to copy this query here. I can pass it here. And the parameter to pass are the input here. Right, so Kemal, if you can send me Lightning invoice.
Sure. Over which channel? On Telegram? Or
Yeah, you can send it on Telegram, yeah. Okay. Maybe you can say what you're doing.
Yeah, I just created a Bolt 11 invoice without an amount on wallet of Satoshi and send it over to Nicolas. So you should have it on Telegram already.
All right, so Telegram. This is a new invoice 420. Yeah. So payment request here. So my wallet ID here, I need to pick from my USD wallet here. Alright. And so if I sum 100, which is 100 cents, so it should be $1. Let's try. Let's see if I have the demo effect. Alright, that should succeed.
Yeah.
You receive $1.
Yeah, I have two now. You sent me one earlier.
Yeah, okay, for the test. And now if I go to my me wallet here, now before I had 2100, now I have about 2000, meaning I send 100, so it's cents, so I send 100 cents. And the key here is that my balance is in USD, and what is happening in the background is there is a dynamic hedging happening on OKX. Yeah, that's it. We can go more tomorrow about how this works if for the people interesting. But basically here is an example from our API where we send USD, the dynamic hedging is happening in the background, and we could also receive USD and there will be the opposite trade. Yep, question.
Is the amount encoded as a message? like key set or something, or is it really set as 100 sets?
So here I have sent 100 cents, so like a subunit of dollar, and this is being converted automatically in the backend from dollar to sats, and the sats is being sent. Here it's a
1, 2.
I think it's, I don't know, its location, maybe here would be better. So here you said you want to send 100 cents and the conversion is on the back end. But the key aspect here is that my balance is in cents, right? I don't have a balance in cents. I mean, in the example here, I have two wallets. I have a BTC wallet, I have a USD wallet. But when I want to do a payment, I always do a payment over Lightning.
Isn't it unwise to send 0 sub invoices? Isn't that a problem?
I think it's a trick question. I'm sure, Carla, you talk about it, you can answer the question. It used to be, and you tell me if I'm saying wrong, but it used to be insecure to have 0 amount invoice, but now you have an additional parameter in the invoice, which is a payment secret. So there is a hash and there is a secret, and the secret is only shared between the sender and the recipient. It's not shared among the voting node, and so today using a 0 amount invoice is as secure as an invoice with an amount. Is that right?
We encode the payment amount as well. So the reason that it used to not be safe to pay a 0 amount invoice is that the recipient didn't know how much to enforce from the final hop. So if Nicolas made a 100 sat invoice and I paid him 100 sat, the second last hop could give him 1 sat and he wouldn't know. Now what we do on the sender side is we encode a total amount DLV, which only Nicolas will receive. So now if I pay him 100 sats, I put a data field in there saying I'm paying you 100 sats on the 0 amount. So if someone tries to route him 1 sat, he rejects the payment because he knows it's not enough.
It is for the key sum, right?
It's TLVs, which key send is as well. It's just extra data fields.
Do you need that even for not key sums, this TLV field?
We do it with all payments now.
Okay. Any other question? All right, thank you guys.
Maybe since this was a little bit technical and like I've been trying to think about this, and the way I found like a good picture to think about it is if you know maybe Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Adam Smith. So there's this babblefish, and what it does is actually converts any language instantly, universally, and it refers to the ancient confusion of languages in the biblical town of Babel. And what we have now is a little bit of a confusion of currencies, right? So language is just an abstraction of information, and currency is an abstraction of value. And you can do this basically with any fiat currency that has a derivative exchange. So in the end, everyone can just use the currency that they like and they're used to, and yeah, send value over the Lightning Network steps. So it's a little bit of a Lightning babblefish, you know.
Okay, so I think we will make a quick 5-minute break, and then we have the kind of last kind of keynote session. So enjoy coffee and tea over there, and we see you again part 3.
I hope you had a good break, got some coffee, fresh air, chocolate, strawberries,
yeah.
Water. So we are already sort of, we're already 2 out of 3 speakers down, and Rene Pickhardt is here. Or is it Rene Pickhardt?
It's Rene Pickhardt.
Rene Pickhardt is here, also known as the king of routing. No?
No, I don't think so.
In any case, I'm just trying to buy some time so everybody hears that we're actually starting and
Oh,
comes
yeah,
in again.
okay.
But I'm just happy you're here because that wasn't so clear just a couple hours ago.
Yes, that's true. The plane had a friendly encounter with a bird, and they were not allowed to take off. They had to cancel the flight because the bird hit the plane, and apparently in Toulouse it's being decided by Airbus if they can take off or not.
I hope the bird's all right.
No, I saw pictures actually. There were bloods everywhere.
Okay. More than a bird.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a lesson. In any case. After we're done, you can go upstairs. There's beer in the 3rd floor. And by the way, it's 3rd floor is also where we're going to be gathering tomorrow morning at 10. So plan your beer consumption accordingly, that you can be here by 10. There's also going to be breakfast before that. So in case you don't have breakfast plans yet, just come here around 9 and you can grab some breakfast. And speaking of food, it will be served on the top floor at the terrace. It's partially covered with umbrellas, and there's some lighting, some heating devices and all that. And the food is pretty good here, actually. I've tried it already, so you shouldn't miss it. And after Rene's infotainment session, we'll have a proper entertainment session, but I'm not going to say too much, and you're going to hear it. So don't forget to come up and get to know each other a bit better, maybe already plan out some projects. The scheduling is going to happen tomorrow at 10, so it's, again, no, I'm just saying, it's kind of crucial that you are there, because if you miss it, you might miss what's going on. We'll meet on the 3rd floor. Everybody is able to present their ideas and their project and form groups to work on. We schedule like workshops and talks and whatever you brought, so being on time is really, really helpful to get your idea across to people, but also to see what's going on, so you can have an idea on what you want to work on, what you want to hear, what you want to talk about, build on, and such. And I think that's about it. Again, very happy to have you here, and let's give it up for Rene Pickhardt.
Thank you, Jeff, for the nice introduction. I was actually, before I start the talk, I also wanted to just buy some time and say a few words, because it was actually Jeff's fault why I'm standing here. And I'm not talking about the fact that he asked me to come here today, but he organized the Lightning Hackdays for quite some time. And I think it was the 2nd Lightning Hackday in Berlin where I had my very first encounter with the Bitcoin community. Because I was just interested in the Lightning Network protocol, because I thought it's a really neat thing. So I went there and I talked to a bunch of people, and it was actually Jeff who said, Rene, what can we do to keep you in this community? So he made a lot of introductions to people, helped me out, and I'm really grateful that Jeff has been so supportive all these years and doing all these fantastic conferences. Also, if I look at the keynote by Carla, I mean, only 1 year after your Lightning Hackday in Berlin, Carla and I were at Chaincode Labs residency, and Carla was basically also doing Lightning builds, so to speak. So it's really amazing what you have been doing here, so thank you.
Oh, it's working. Because I was just going to ask you for your support, because we need a USB cable, but that's been fixed. So thank you for your time.
All right, so perfect, let's start. And just please ignore the very first slide, you don't have to stand up, but please raise your hand if you have used Lightning before. Okay, perfect. I assume everybody was getting pay tickets. No, keep your hand up. So put your hand down if you never ever had a failed payment on a Lightning Network. Damn it, okay. Yes, keep it up. That's somebody else that was in the audience. Keep your hand up if 50% of your payments, I estimate, are faster than, let's say, 5 seconds. Okay, so I see still a lot of hands here. So what this means is there's still a lot of, you can keep it down now, right? Thank you. The entire talk. So what I want to say already, despite the results that we have discovered together with Stefan Richter in the last year, I believe there's still plenty of room for improvement to make Lightning Network more reliable, faster, instant settlement, these kinds of things that we all love about Lightning. And that's basically my main work here. The question is, if your payments had failures in the past, why is that the case? So just some ideas from you. What could be reasons why your payments on the Lightning Network did not work?
Insufficient liquidity.
Insufficient liquidity, yes, perfect. That's obviously the one that I want to hear and talk about. But that being said, there are some other common failure reasons. For example, your internet connection could just be down. Then in most cases, you don't reach the node, you can't really interact with the network. The channels are being disabled, so not your internet connection is down, but the channel that you want to use for routing might have a node that is down. The channel can be jammed. Some people have exploited this already in the past by experimentation, but I would argue if the Lightning Network is being used more and more, it can actually naturally, without any bad behavior by people, happen that the channel jams. If you want to look this up, there is an excellent paper called The Price of Anarchy, which has a very Bitcoiner name by Tim Roughgarden, and it's called The Price of Anarchy and Selfish Routing. So whenever you do routing with selfish interest, which source-based routing is, you might actually overload the network just naturally. So these things can happen. Well, you might not have set a sufficient fee. That's one of the... Yeah, I learned that I just have to wait and wave the microphone, so I do that. So the insufficient fee, right? So a node changes their fees. They gossip this out, but the information hasn't reached you yet. So when you make the payment and the payment fails because you didn't set the fees properly or your node didn't set the fees properly. And then, of course, as somebody right away said, there's missing liquidity, which is often encoded by temporary channel failure. I mean, there might be other reasons why we have a temporary channel failure, but my claim basically is that most of the time that this happens is we try to route along a channel where the channel had a large enough capacity, but just on that end of the channel, there was just not enough liquidity to forward the payment. That's why they couldn't forward the payment. They sent back an error onion, and then we have to try over again in this try and attempt payment loop. Okay, so yeah, the talk is basically structured in two things because there were two papers being put out, and some of the stuff is already being implemented by C Lightning and by LDK, and kudos also again to Carla when she mentioned that Cash App onboarded 36 million people to Lightning. As far as I understand, they onboarded them 2 weeks after they merged the probabilistic pathfinding in LDK, and they're using LDK in their LSP service provider. So it's quite amazing that these results are actually finding their way of being used. So I want to basically, in the first part, talk about probabilistic pathfinding, and then in the second part of the talk about optimally reliable payment flows and how these two things interact with each other. And the main reason why I'm talking about this is, despite the fact that the math is clear and from a mathematical point of view we have solved these problems, on an implementation level there's quite some challenges still left, and since it's the Hackday, I decided to use this keynote spot and not really give a proper keynote but more a technical deep dive, because it's the Hackday, first of all, and already 3 years ago it was very technical, and second of all I hope to have hacking sessions with anybody to you tomorrow. Some people already contacted me beforehand, so we can try to actually experiment around this. So this is basically an advertisement of, hey, let's hack together tomorrow and the day after. And that's why I'm just repeating some of the basics so we get on the same page. So for those who already read those papers, apologies if this is going boring for you now. So the main question that we're trying to answer on the Lightning Network is, how do we deliver some Satoshis from a sending node S to a destination node D? And these numbers here are the channel capacities measured in Satoshis. And we all know there won't be a channel with a 2 Satoshi capacity. But we researchers, we like to just make really small numbers at nice cases, right? So just think of this. So the main question is, how do we do this nowadays on the Lightning Network? Or how should we do this? Or how should we think about doing this? Any ideas? Okay, let's look at the 1 Satoshi case. How can I deliver 1 Satoshi? And let's think about, again, how could we do this? So my main claim is, before our research, what Nodes mainly did is they looked at the fees and they tried to find the cheapest way through the network. But the fees do not necessarily encode where the liquidity is located on the network. In particular, if everybody is going with the cheap fees, we run exactly into something like the price of anarchy and selfish routing. Those channels might be drained. While that paper has a different connotation, that's at least the gist for it. So my main claim is to say, well, let's look at probabilities, right? So before I look at a concrete path through the network, let's just look at this very channel. So we have a 2 Satoshi channel, and I want to forward 1 Satoshi through A to B. The main question is, how likely is this to be successful? Does anybody here have an idea? 1 Satoshi on a 2 Satoshi capacity channel. Yeah.
It depends on the probability distribution, right?
Perfect. I love the nerds here. It depends on the probability distribution. Perfectly correct. Assuming a uniform distribution.
Then it's 66%.
Okay, so I'm hearing 25, 66, 50. All right, so obviously math is, even with the uniform distribution, a little bit complicated, so let me walk you through. The success probability for success can be encoded in this formula. I can derive it, we can derive it later. Just believe this formula to me. The capacity is 2 in this case. The amount is 1. If I plug everything in and I compute all this out, the probability is 2 out of thirds. Because you are successful if A has 2 Satoshis or if A has 1 Satoshi. And if A has 0 Satoshi, then you are not successful.
No, because it's not real. It's integers, yeah.
First of all, it's integers. Second of all, I ignore reserves. I ignore all those technical details here, right? Because, it's about the principle. But what I'm basically saying, if the capacity is 2, we have basically 3 cases, right? And 2 out of these 3 cases are good for us to be successful to route this payment. Okay, so...
what about millisatoshis, though? It's 1001 over 2000. Right?
Sure, yeah, but with millisatoshis, with millisatoshis, what I would do is I would basically encode this as a 2000 millisatoshi channel, and then I have 2001 cases, right? Yeah, but basically, it's just 0 and the full amount are 2 cases, which people tend to overcount. It doesn't really matter. I want you just to understand that there is some math that we can actually encode this properly. So what we can obviously also do is we can compute this probability for every single channel on the network and write down this probability, right? So what is the probability to deliver 1 Satoshi from B to D? It's also 4/5, right? So basically with the same formulas as before, and it's just going like this. So now the question that I'm curious is, given all those probabilities, what is the path through the network that maximizes this probability? Right? Because, it seems so natural, right? I have a network where the payment process is basically a little bit random, because sometimes liquidity is missing. I have this uncertainty, I don't know this, right? So what is, at least from my perspective, the most reasonable thing that I can do? Well, do the thing that is most likely to succeed, right? If you want to play the lottery or whatever, you want to gamble, you make a bet where you say, I'm doing a bet that has a positive outcome for me. All right. So what I want to stress here is that the payment delivery is successful if and only if every used channel is successful, right? So what this means is when we look at a path, we have to be successful 2 out of 3 times here, 2 out of 3 times here, 4 out of 4 times here. So what we basically do is we multiply these probabilities together. We end up with some fraction and we end up with a number of 0.355 as our probability to be successful when we want to deliver 1 Satoshi along this path. For those who are very nerdy, this probability in theory should be 1 because it's our channel and we know if we have 1 Satoshi here or not. For for our case, just imagine I have another node here, and this is where I start the uncertainty stuff, right? So given this path, my probability is 0.355 and forever. Okay, so what I could also do is I could basically look at another path, which is the bottom path. So I multiply all these numbers together, and then I end up with a slightly lower probability of 0.35. Right? And of course, I mean, if the probabilities are that close to each other, it doesn't really matter. I mean, then the entire research, but the example is obviously artificial. And then, given our example graph, we have at least another possibility to route this payment, which is going through this really large capacity, highly so-called attractive channel. And when you multiply all these numbers, you end up at the highest probability of 0.36. So if I was sitting here and I wanted to deliver the payment, this would actually be the path that I would try first. Okay, so this is to some degree, I would say, easy to understand, hopefully. The question is, how can I do this efficiently? Right? In reality, what I do not want to do is I do not want to write down all the paths. I do not want to write down all the products and compute all those numbers, right? Because there's quite some possibilities on the actual Lightning Network. I mean, I can write down billions of paths. Even a computer would screw up at some point in time. So I want to do this a little bit faster. And luckily, what people do usually if they want to search shortest paths is they use some form of Dijkstra algorithm. That's the algorithm that currently most implementations use on the Lightning Network. Only problem with the Dijkstra algorithm, okay, yeah, maybe that was me. So only problem with the Dijkstra algorithm, of course, is on Dijkstra we usually add up the weights on the edges, right? And here we have a product to do this. But luckily there is basically some math tricks that we can basically say, well, if we use the negative logarithm of all these numbers, we can basically just apply Dijkstra's algorithm and take the result of the Dijkstra algorithm. It's the same as just finding the most likely path. So yeah, that is basically what we did in our first paper. And I was looking at this and I was like, great, this is awesome. Let's use this, let's try this out. C-Lightning implemented this and it's working really good. We did some experiments in a simulation. We didn't do it on mainnet. But what we basically did is we compared the number of attempts that we needed to deliver a payment with the standard routing algorithms and compared it to the probabilistic framework. And on the probabilistic framework, we reduced the number of attempts that were necessary on average quite a bit. And yeah, that was really nice. But what then happened is that C-Lightning implemented this at some point in time, and it was like, if you look at this small tweet here, it's really a one-line code change. It's really funny. In the past, I tried to attract funding from people, and they were like, "Yeah, how many lines of code will you produce?" And I'm like, "I'm doing research. You know, I'm doing research." And they're like, "Yeah, but like, how productive will you be?" Well, after 2 years of research, we make a one-line code change, and C-Lightning has a 50% better ability to deliver payments, right? So the time dropped by 50%, the success rate increased by 50%. Like everything was better, just with this really simple change in the cost function of the Dijkstra algorithm, which was great. So yeah, everybody was happy about this. We did some like real mainnet diagrams. We plotted this, and then people became aware and were like, yeah, we also want this in our implementation. So as I said, LDK implemented a beta version of this actually, which is used by Cash App right now, and I think LND has an open issue that they want to have it in the next release, and hopefully we can talk a little bit on the Hackday. So yeah, I will just talk a little bit about some of the like geeky numbers that you could see from these pictures. So as I said, 50% of payment attempts were successful on the first try when we used the probabilistic pathfinding on C-Lightning. Before it was 40%. These numbers are a little bit skewed because Christian used a lot of very small amounts in the benchmark, and small amounts have a high likelihood in either case, right? So take these numbers a little bit with precaution. But the median payment time was 5.7 seconds. That's why I asked before, like 50% of your time, is it faster than 5 seconds? So here in 50% of all payments, within 5.7 seconds, we could deliver the payment. Before it was 8.6 seconds, so that's quite some improvement. And the failure rate of payments where C Lightning basically gave up now is 4.5%, and before it was 9.7%. So also there, C Lightning actually is now better to find the liquidity on the network, which is really great. And Christian has written a blog article about this, you can find out more. But I hope a lot of people still know this pretty nice picture, so there's obviously room for improvement. And some people know. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. So let's talk about the consequences about this probabilistic approach. So the first thing that we can do is we can learn from our previous attempts, right? If you have a probability function, and let's say you tried a channel in the past that is, let's say, 100 Satoshi in size, and I tried a 50 Satoshi payment and it didn't work. Well, I can update using Bayesian learning my probability function and basically say, well, now when I make a smaller payment, it might still work, but a larger payment will certainly never work because the 50 Satoshi payment already didn't work. So yeah, we can basically introduce the notion of an uncertainty network. That is exactly what Cash App did when they, or what LDK did when they implemented this. And we can especially do this during one payment delivery session. But of course, you can also keep the knowledge for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes, for an hour. And people, this is an open research question. So if you want to hack around, we currently don't know how long we want to keep the learned information from our payment attempts. Probably depends also a little bit on your node. We can then also make better privacy guarantees. So the question, of course, is if you have this probability function, you can always measure the entropy of a channel. Whenever you make a payment and it's successful or it fails, you learn something about the channel. So you know how many bits of entropy you learn with every payment attempt. So what we can do is we can actually look at protocol changes and look at the impact of how are the privacy guarantees changing this. So for example, there is this proposal that I'm still somewhat advocating for, not as heavily as 2 years ago, but I still think it's reasonable, where I'm saying maybe we should share the liquidity information of our node with our peers, right? And to many people this sounds crazy, but in reality everybody is probing their peers already all the time anyway, right? And they're learning their liquidity with the probed information. So I could already do this proactively maybe, but I can actually quantify this now of how bad is this for privacy or how good is this for privacy? What are the trade-offs? So I think there's a nice opportunity to do more research in this field. And then of course, following your suggestion initially, I can also think about modeling different probabilities. So let me change the microphone, perfect. So, I mean, right now what we did is we basically used the uncertainty about the liquidity on the network. But of course we could, for example, measure the node reliability in general from all the payments that we observed over the past and do something like a provenance score or a route score or node score. I know we have at least somebody in the audience here, hi Xavi, who's working on stuff like this. And we can just basically, I just don't care about the live stream at some point in time and just talk louder. Just come to the place. Yeah, so we can basically include the node reliability into this probability function by doing the joint distribution and basically be more precise in our predictions by just using the same framework, just changing the cost function again a little bit. Maybe we can do the same as node reliability for channel reliability, right? If some node is there that always rebalances their channels, I mean, it's costly for them, but it should be awarded at some point in time, right? Even though it's maybe a small channel, but it's always available when we want to route through it. Or something like if it's disabled, channel force clauses, right? We can use all these things that we see on chain. And the last thing that we can do is, and this is really where in the beginning of last year I was hitting my head against the wall several times, and we're very lucky that at some point in time Stefan was coming in, is try to apply this to multi-part payments. So the question is, you know, I mean, if I want to send one Satoshi, I can easily use the Dijkstra search to find the most likely part. But then the question emerges, when I want to send 2 Satoshis, do I actually send 1 Satoshi across 2 different paths, or do I send one Satoshi, two Satoshis in one single onion, and what is the better way to do this? And in general, if you look at the implementations, they currently basically split payments into arbitrary sizes. The motivation always is that smaller payments have a higher reliability. I mean, everybody knew this already. It comes also out from probability theory. But the question is, when and why do we really want to split? So this is the problem that we studied. Just to let you know, if you really want to go deep with me at some point in the weekend, we're going to look a lot at this picture, but it's just like advertisement for people who want to. It's also in the paper. You can just read the paper anyway. So yeah. So the question really is to split or not to split. As I just said, smaller payments have a larger success probability. That's the main motivation for multi-part payments. But the other thing is, the more channels are included into a payment, the more the success probability drops, right? Remember, we had to multiply all of this together. So the success probability drops exponentially. Everybody in Bitcoin space should understand what exponential decay means. Right, it's fast. Right, and of course, we can use the information from failed attempts. So let's talk a little bit about optimally reliable and fast payment flows on the Lightning Network. And look at the 2 Satoshi case, and that's also the main reason why this diagram is a little bit artificial, because we already have a very interesting observation in the 2 Satoshi case when we look at this particular graph. Okay, thank you. That's third microphone. So that's the same graph as before, just a little bit different notation. So again, we have 2 Satoshi capacity on those, and then 4 and 4 later ones, and then we have this highly attractive, interesting channel in the middle. And then now the same question is again, what might be the best way to deliver 2 Satoshis from S to D? So let's try a single 2 Satoshi path. All right, obviously I cannot do it on the bottom because here I only have 1 Satoshi of capacity. I will never be able to route 2 Satoshis on this. So I have to start somewhere here, and then I end up at B. And from B I can make choices. I can either go through this like detour, or I can directly go to D. I hope what everybody will see is that from a probabilistic point of view, taking the detour doesn't make sense, right? Because this probability will be the same as this probability. And here I'm just multiplying numbers smaller than 1 into the product, right? So just going on the upper part will be the best way to deliver 2 Satoshis on this network without even having to calculate this. And if you do calculate this, the probability to deliver this is 6.66%. Okay, recall, if we wanted to send 1 Satoshi, the most likely path of doing this was taking this detour and had a 36% probability to be successful. So obviously sending 2 Satoshis is already much harder than sending 1 Satoshis on the Lightning Network, especially if your graph is that small. So when we use this best 1 Satoshi path, what we see is that this channel now is fully capacitated, right? Because we already use 1 out of 1 Satoshi on this path. So if we want to deliver the residual amount, we basically now have to go again somewhere here, right? So let's assume we plan our payment session by saying we start with the most likely path. We want to allocate 1 Satoshi here. We want to allocate 1 Satoshi here. Well, we can split, and then we can go the upper way. And when we go the upper way, we have the same situation as before. We end up with our 1 Satoshi at B. But now the question that we had before changes a little bit, right? So not the question, but the way how we approach it to answer it. The question is this final last Satoshi that is arriving in B here. Should we add 2 Satoshis in total on this channel? Or should we basically go back and take this detour? That's the question I was hitting my head on quite a bit, and it took quite some time to find this graph as a counterexample, because my assumption all the time was, well, you start with the most likely path, and then you add the second most likely path, and then the third most likely path, and you have a nice little algorithm to solve this problem, but that does not work, right? You don't find the optimal solution.
They are not independent of each other.
Yes and no, but that's a different question, I think. But anyway, let me just show you the solution here. So if I allocate 1 Satoshi here, I can just multiply all those channel success probabilities together again, and I end up at a 12% likelihood to deliver the payment. Or, that's the fun part, if I go down here, I cancel out one probability, right? Before I allocate 1 Satoshi in this direction, then 1 Satoshi in that direction. That means I don't use this channel at all. It shouldn't contribute to the product. And then I basically send 1 Satoshi on the top part and 1 Satoshi on the lower part. And this has a 12.44% probability to be delivered. And if you study this problem fully with like libraries and you compute this through, you will actually see that this is the best strategy to deliver 2 Satoshis on this network. And yeah, it's actually took us quite some time to find the algorithm to do this properly. So I already knew all of this when Stefan joined. And I had some form of an algorithm to find that solution. Yes? You have to speak up, sorry, I don't hear you at all. Yeah, so the thing is, when you send 1 Satoshi in this direction, what you do is you add 9/10 to your product in the probability, right? But when I want to put 1 Satoshi in this direction, I'm not adding 9/10 again, I'm dividing by 9/10 because I'm removing the 1 Satoshi that already flew in there. Now I'm dividing by a number that is smaller than 1, so I'm increasing my overall probability, right? And that was kind of like a weird thing in my head at this point in time. And maybe this is not the best way to explain this, but yeah, there's another question. Yeah, so you are right, actually. It's not true the way how we talked about it right now. But we are in payment planning. So payment planning doesn't mean I'm sending 1 Satoshi here and then I'm sending another one there. I'm planning to send one here, one there, right? And then I actually do the entire payment. And what I do then is I don't use that channel at all, right? And that's why it doesn't contribute to lowering my probability, right? So the question of splitting is the question of planning my payment. And maybe I did not explain this well, but yeah, hopefully that became clearer now and not more confusing sometimes. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So yeah, it turns out that this is the best strategy to do this. And the fun part is, while I was trying to find an efficient algorithm to compute this, Stefan joined me and said, this looks all very familiar and we have to do this better. And there's a tool in computer science which are called min-cost flows. So what we're actually doing is we're trying to find a flow through this network that minimizes our cost, and our costs here are our negative log probabilities. So yeah, then we basically just read up the entire theory from computer science books and tried to implement one of those algorithms because in our case the cost function was a little bit not linear and not nice. So anyway. Min-cost flows are a standard tool used in logistics, warehouse logistics, traffic routing, trading and finance, scheduling time lots everywhere, and on the Lightning Network. That's the final result. We published our paper. That was this tweet. And we were very excited. We're like, it's unbelievable, right? So I was doing this research with this probabilistic pathfinding, and I thought, yeah, this is a really neat result. But there's an incremental delta. We have to address this question of splitting. But while I was solving this, I was like, wow, addressing this question of splitting actually improves Lightning and the way we can think about Lightning by quite a bit, because now we can actually really send large amounts over the network. So we're publishing this paper being really excited and a bit afraid because we thought the Bitcoin caches would hate on us, which apparently they didn't. But some people in the Lightning community were very critical about our results. And what we then did within 11 days is we actually did a mainnet test and implemented this not only in the lab but also on mainnet. And what we did is we delivered 0.3679 Bitcoins over the Lightning Network, and it was split into 345 parts, which was the optimal split according to our calculations. And then some of the onions returned, and then we had to do some more onions, right? But we have been able to deliver this amount, which was quite an experience. I mean, yeah, I was just like on my notes seeing how HTLCs were arriving, and it was just fun. And we were all the time afraid that the channel would get a forced close, because then we had to pay quite some fees with all the HTLCs in the channel. But it didn't happen. So kudos to all the Lightning developers that created good software before, right? Because that's not what I did at that point. So yeah, nowadays min cost flows are used and can be used on the Lightning network. But they are computationally still a little bit heavy. Yes? So the fee I paid for those was 0, because I decided to be as unethical as a lot of people who are probing the network constantly, and I never released the pre-image. So what happened is all the HTLCs were coming from Stefan's node to mine, and when the amount was there, I basically said, hey, I don't know the pre-image, so we basically canceled all the HTLCs. So I didn't have to pay a single Satoshi in fees. But what I can tell you is, we were actually building this on top of LND, because Lightning Labs were the most critical about our results, and we're saying, hey, it's already working pretty well on LND, so we wanted to directly compare to LND. And we discovered this really unnice thing where when you have a parallel channel, we basically wanted to use this one channel, and we told the API to do so, but LND decided to use the other channel of the parallel channels. Yeah. So LND used the other one, and that happened in the channel between, I think, OKCoin and Bitrefill. I'm not sure. And there the base fee was set to like 10 millibitcoin. So if we actually had released the pre-image, we would have paid quite some fees, even though we wanted to use the parallel channel. So yeah, but we didn't pay fees at all. So yeah. Yeah, but I think if I remember correctly, so what we did is we accounted the fees. So we basically looked at what fees would we have to pay, and I think it was something around 40,000 Satoshis at that time. Maybe 60, maybe 30, somewhere around, but it was definitely less than a millibitcoin, which I think, given the amount that we were trying to say, is quite reasonable. I mean, fee rates are often 100 ppm on channels, so yeah. Yep.
How many rounds of splitting did you have to do for this?
Yeah, that's a poor question to ask. Well, actually, it's a very good question to ask, but it's an unfair question to ask in our particular setting, because we also wanted to basically, let's say, pick a fight with LND. Yeah, because they were, well, anyway. So, so Stefan created a new Lightning node, and he just said, here is the amount of liquidity I provide to this node. Please, LND autopilot, open random channels. And the autopilot in LND really opened some poor channels. And with those poor channels, what happened is actually it chose one channel with Bitfinex. And there we found the liquidity basically directly, and everything worked fine. But with some of the poorer channels, we actually had, I think, 10 rounds of probing until on these two particular nodes that we had channels with, we actually found one of those channels that actually had liquidity, because they seem to have a lot of inbound. But what we could observe actually is that once we hit those walls, it went pretty quickly, right? So we had several rounds where no improvement was there at all, right? But once we bypassed that node, then actually it worked kind of like expected. But I think overall we had something like 15, 20 rounds, yeah. But I think if we had opened smarter channels, which obviously we could have done, it would have been much better.
And sorry, how long did it take, this one payment?
I think the 0.36 Bitcoin payment was something like 118 seconds. Yeah, so I mean that's better than 10 minutes, but obviously not 5 seconds. That being said, the main issue here is the min cost flow solver, which is computationally heavy. But I think given the fact that we did almost, so I think we had on average 6 seconds per min cost flow computation. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously more work that needs to be done to write a proper min cost flow solver that might also prune the network. I have some ideas how to do this, because we can already pretty good estimate where the flow is actually lying. So then we can reduce the size of the graph, and we can do all of these things. Yeah, but it's ongoing research to make this better. But I think I have a slide on this where there's also some other setbacks, and I will talk about them when the slide comes up, because there were actually some other setbacks that we had with this result that were, at least how we say it, beyond our scope or beyond what we could do. So just to be clear, when I talk about min cost flows, cost does not mean routing fees. Cost means the negative logarithm of the probabilities. That's how we express the uncertainty as a cost, and then we solve this optimization problem. And again, that's a standard trick. Of course, what we can do is we can also optimize for fees or for a combination of both, right? And this is already happening. And some nodes are also including other features like CLTV. I'm currently pretty actively looking at latency of channels and geodistance because, and I should have put this on the slides here, but I made a diagram together with a colleague at my university where we looked at the gossip data from Lightning, and then we used some service to locate the Lightning nodes on the world map and looked what is the geodistance of the payment channels. And about 50% of all payment channels have a geodistance that is larger than 5,000 kilometers, meaning cross-continent. And I think this is just severely poor. I mean, payments are obviously a local problem. So yeah, anyway, so I think there's a lot of feature engineering to be happening in how to write down a proper cost function. And yeah, I hope people are going to be excited and talk with me about this. I want to onboard as many people as possible to talk about these fascinating math problems. And then there's an obvious question in the room, why do we need the zero base fee? And I do have to explain this because there's quite some misconceptions out there in the world about the zero base fee discussion. So first misconception, did I start a zero base fee movement or a social media campaign? No, I did not. No, I literally did not. I mean, I now do wear a t-shirt which somebody gave to me. I didn't buy this myself. But what happened is we wrote this paper, and in the paper we had the sentence, we encourage the Lightning community to drop the base fee to zero. For reasons that I will explain here in a second. And then we went to a podcast and talked about the paper, and some member of the German Bitcoin community was like posting a screenshot on Twitter, putting hashtag zero base fee, and said, done, right? And Stefan and I were having a call, and we're like, we haven't done this to our node, right? So because we were more on like talking to the developers, talking about protocol improvements, resolving the problem, being afraid because of the base fee Lightning routing or cost for solving is NP complete, that the B cachers would be afraid, right? So this is how this thing emerged. So there's that. But now the question of why do we actually need the zero base fee? So it turns out that the runtime of min cost flow solvers very heavily depends on the mathematical structure of our cost function. So if the cost function was just a linear function, then we can use techniques from linear programming, and the min cost flow solver is wicked fast. Right? If I would do this, and even in Python, I have min cost flow solvers on the Lightning Network that run within a second. And Python has a very poor networking library. Right? So the linear case is just ridiculously easy. And luckily, if we drop the base fee, the fee is a linear function. It's just A times X, or ppm times the amount. Right? So this is great. But when we use the negative logarithms of our probability functions, this function turns out to be convex. And there's this great research paper from the 80s that proved that there are polynomial solutions for this optimization problem if the cost function is convex. Right? So if we want to take the probabilities into account, unless we linearize them, which I tried playing around with and which is tricky for a lot of other reasons, we are in this convex case. But obviously, we do not only want to look at probabilities, right? Because if I have the largest channel on the network, everybody's going to route from me, and then I set my fees ridiculously high, and if the implementations don't check for fees, well, then I got to pay the fee, right? And this is bad. So we have to have a combination of the fee and the probabilities, and now comes the really big problem. If the cost function is not linear or convex, the optimization problem turns out to be NP hard. And the base fee is actually the thing as written down here in this little proof, and just take a picture or whatever, right? It turns out it's just not linear. And this little non-linearity breaks the algorithm. And believe me, before we wrote the paper, we did probably what every student always has done once in their life of being like, I can solve this NP hard problem. I can just like try around with little tricks. So we try to ignore the base fee. We try to approximate. We tried. The algorithm breaks, right? So the convex min cost flow solvers that we had, they all break if we keep the base fee. Try it yourself. Maybe you find something. Maybe you solve a really important math problem. I trust on the fact that this problem is really hard. So that's the reason why we believe that we should really deprecate the base fee. Or at least I think we should deprecate the base fee, but some people think the market should just set it to 0. And I just looked at Xavi's website, LN Router. He has a visualization of the 0 base fee graph, and I think now it was 37% of all channels are using 0 base fees. So that's a third of you. Thank you very much. Yeah? Yeah, so I mean, good question. The question, I just repeat for the stream, did we estimate what happens if we just ignore the base fee basically in computation and then just pay up, right? We can do this, obviously. And we did in our experiments because, I mean, we had to, right? Because at that point in time, only 15% of the channels were 0 base fee. But the problem is it's insecure. And I'm kind of surprised that nobody really talks about this vulnerability, because if I just ignore the base fee, a node operator can obviously game me and just later add a really high base fee if they know that nodes in pathfinding ignore it and later just pay it up, right? So right now, where the base fee for most nodes are just 1 Satoshi, it's really, really not a problem. I just ignore it and I pay it, right? But obviously, a smart node operator says, yes, I'm going to set it to 2. And then everybody does it, and they set it to 3, right? And at some point in time, we do have to do this estimation, and it turns out that the estimation is not worthwhile doing this anymore. So yeah, there's that, right? So yeah, it's really an issue. All right, I think I have one more slide. Or 2. So yeah, what we learned is optimally splitting minimizes the number of attempts and the locked up liquidity over time. That's actually one of the things that we didn't talk about in our paper at all because we didn't know this at this time. But what happened when we did our mainnet experiments is that we realized that always taking the most likely path actually increases the success probability and it reduces the amount of time that we bind liquidity. We figured this out because we gave LND way more time than they usually give themselves for the payment loop to deliver payments. And a few HTLCs were locked in while they were searching for other paths to lock in more HTLCs, right? And we just basically saw, wow, the liquidity is locked up for the network, right? So while people have been saying, hey, when you split so heavily, you spam the network, no, we actually take load from the network because we help the network to deliver quickly, or we use the network as best as possible. Small payments obviously don't need a split. I would say everything up to 1 millibitcoin you can probably just deliver without splitting. I mean, it depends, of course, on your particular node and neighborhood and where you want to send, but in general, that's probably the rough number. And the other thing is being able to compute single paths is really not optimal when you want to do MPP. And when you want to deliver large amounts, you have to do MPP. And since we kind of are here because I think we agreed together that Lightning payments are the future for Bitcoin payments, well, we obviously do not only want to send 1 millibitcoin around, but substantial amounts at some point in time. And yeah, the base fee obviously makes the flow computation NP hard. So the problems that we discovered in our mainnet test, and that's my last slide that I promised you to talk about, are some problems with the protocol actually. So one problem that we discovered in our mainnet experiment quite heavily are stuck payments. I mean, it's not something that we discovered per se. I mean, everybody knew this before, right? I don't want to claim ownership for this. But it became very, very obvious that if we don't resolve the stuck payment issue, all the stuff that we are doing currently is not really helpful. Because sometimes just the fact that an HTLC returns a minute later is really an issue, yeah, where we don't have to do what we're doing. Luckily, PTLCs are now possible with taproot activation, so we can do this. But one other reason that I think was not mentioned in Carla's excellent talk, why we need onion messages, or why at least I think we need onion messages, was that we want to have acknowledgements for HTLCs or PTLCs that are being logged in, right? So then we know, because right now we send out the onion and the only acknowledgement that we get is the pre-image. But in the MPP case, we don't know how many have actually arrived or are stuck, right? So we need to have an acknowledgement so that we know what we can do. And yeah, I mean, still all the time when we have a stuck payment, liquidity is bound that we cannot use in this time, and we're loading liquidity on the network. There's this really interesting paper called Boomerang. I think it emerged in late 2019, which I keep talking about because I think it's completely overlooked. What they introduce is to say, hey, use Schnorr signatures and SHA-2 secret sharing and PTLCs to allow ourselves to have redundant overpayments. Right? So what this would mean is when I want to, let's say, I want to send 1 Bitcoin, I don't send out 1 Bitcoin, I actually send out 2 Bitcoins, right? Because I expect some of the onions will fail, but the recipient can only claim 1 Bitcoin, right? Even if more HTLCs would come in. And what I think is we should actually reformulate our optimization problem, not to find the most likely payment flow, but we should find the payment flow that has an expected value of the amount that we actually want to deliver. Yeah?
You might need to raise your hand to the antennas at the base of the microphone.
Oh, maybe that's the problem. Thank you. Yeah, so as just, I will just repeat it to get back into my thought. I think our optimization goal of having the most likely flow is still not the best optimization goal. I think we need something like redundant overpayment, right? Because then your question of how many rounds of computation just is not relevant anymore. I just do an overpayment, I do 1 computation of this min cost flow problem, I send this out, and on average, this is sufficient to be successful. And obviously that's the experience you want to have on the user end at some point in time. Yeah. Lightning onions are currently designed for paths instead of flows, right? So when you compute a flow, what can happen is that on a single channel, you want to actually send in 2 HTLCs because then they split up on different outbound channels at some point in time, right? And right now you would actually really log in 2 HTLCs, and this doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, trampoline routing claims that it might mitigate this. I think there is some chance to mitigate this a bit. I think another thing that we can do is we can basically use something that I call update HTLC. So instead of update add HTLC, I would basically just ask the node, hey, you already have an HTLC in, can we just update the amount and bump this because there's a second path coming in from the flow, and this is the amount I actually want to send through you. So in case the channel hits the chain, it's good. Of course, there's issues with CLTV deltas because different flows have different time locks, and it's shitty. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I learned over the last 3.5 years, that this protocol is really complex. Anyway, thank you very much. There are some reference and helpful links, hopefully, and I'll be here for the next 2 days, and I'm really looking forward to talk with you guys and also look at the fun things that you are doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Where's Jeff? Because he's still kind of the master of ceremony, basically. So
now you became it.
as far as I know, like these were the 3 talks we had for you. So you enjoyed the Cobac stage here. The rest of the event, Jeff, is upstairs then, right? In the 3rd floor, right?
Wrong.
It's on the 3rd floor and on the rooftop. As I said earlier, we are going. I think dinner should be ready now. If it's not, it's ready in the next 30 minutes or so. It's upstairs on the rooftop. There's beer on the 3rd floor. It's a little pricey. It's 420 sats per beer. The rest is sponsored by Pombino, a local. They built these beer things. You know where the beer comes out. How do you call it?
Tap.
Yeah, but not the tap. Maybe the tap. The faucet. Yeah, they built faucets. And they're sponsoring the beer. So and they actually worked on integrating the payment system together with Candle. So they seem to know this stuff as well. So you can chat them up and talk how they actually did it. As far as I know, it's written in C. So that also sounds like it's quite challenging. In any case, so beer, food, and there's going to be some music, so just enjoy your night, and we'll see each other at the latest tomorrow, 10, third floor, for all the scheduling, the session planning with Rootsall, and all that. So have a great afternoon. Thank you for tuning into the live stream. And enjoy the Hackday.
He said beer.